So again, welcome everyone. Before we get into the talk today, I guess this is part of the talk. In terms of the practice we've done, the meditation, the mindfulness, aspiration, the various things that have been covered in the last couple of hours, uh, are there any questions? Anything not clear about the practice? Again, that I take your silence, meaning that everyone is clear. If your silence is because you don't want to speak up, that's the wrong response. So, so everyone is clear about the practice? Yes. Uh-huh. Um, Comment on.
um, when um, when you were talking during the kind of guided meditation, you mentioned something about aspirations, and I know we discussed this
Mm-hmm,
in the practice all the time, but
mm-hmm,
you made it clear that every time we sit down or um, do our daily practices, we have to do
mm-hmm,
we have to have clear our aspirations,
mm-hmm.
and that kind of struck a chord.
And not what?
It struck something inside of me. It just
Uh-huh.
really makes an impact and made
It struck a good thing inside you.
yes.
Oh, good. Well,
So
hopefully it struck a good aspiration in you. Yeah, I mean, many people wander in this life because they're not clear about their life. You know, if you don't know the road you want to be on, how are you going to know when you're on the wrong road? Or when you get to crossroads, how are you going to know which road to take? Do you know what I'm saying? And life is always like that, right? There are always lots of different roads to go on, and there are crossroads. And so, really, all day we're making choices, right? Really. I mean, how we show up moment to moment is sort of say, it should be a choice. And so, the clearer, you know, in other words, if we've already chosen, uh, then life is easy, right? I mean, choices and decisions are easy. It doesn't mean easy like sometimes there's not complexity to it, but you know where you want to go. You know how you want to show up. You know how you want to be, no matter where you are. And so you have a reference point that's always present to you. But without that reference point, it's difficult. Or to a reference point that's like a blinking light. Sometimes it's on. you know, it just makes it more difficult if there's somewhere you want to get to. If there's nowhere you want to get to, that's fine. But if there's somewhere you want to get to, you want to be enlightened, you want to be liberated, you want to be free, or you want to be happy, or you want to be peaceful. You know what I mean? The things that support that, and the things that don't support that, and the things that sabotage that are always, especially in our world, always arising. And so again, the greater clarity we have about that, it's just easier, right? But you all understand that, don't you? That's why you're here. And Angie's doing a two-part. She began last week. She's finishing tomorrow on the Sunday practice on what's called the vow-centered life. Tomorrow's part two. Very important. Actually, probably the most important. Right? But you all know that? I mean, is that clear to everybody? Anybody that's not clear to? I mean, not clear about what we're talking about here? Are there any questions about that? Good. So moving right along. So this mindful living path, intensive, and again, for those who don't know our community, we have various intensives. Right now, we have a intensive, the mindful living path, and we have an intensive in the Dharma path on what are called the mind trainings or lojong. And then we have a sutra study, people studying the Vimalakirti Sutra. And so these are 3 month, 6 month practice periods that have various kinds of commitments and that people can make, but they're really for people like in our community who are lay people, who have lives, have families, have jobs, but yet want to, are serious about their practice. So this is a way to do it. Now, in the mindful living path, their intensive involves looking at aspiration and commitments and things like that we've touched on this morning. And I believe that's what they've been primarily focusing on, but now they'll be moving into uh, what are called in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, the mindfulness trainings, other traditions, Buddhist tradition called precepts, and then they'll be moving into the teachings on the four nutriments. So this morning I want to talk about uh, these trainings, because they are essential. In the Buddhist tradition, the training has three parts. The first part is the training in what's called Shila, or it's sort of like about conduct. All the things that informs our conduct, our actions of body, speech, and mind that really relate to what we might call character, sort of, how we are as a person and how we show up. The next section is samadhi, which is really all the teachings having to do with meditation and concentration and mindfulness. And then the third section, which is the wisdom, the cultivation of wisdom, understanding of how things really are. So these are the three. If somebody says, if you follow the Buddha's way, well, what do you do? Well, we practice these three. We train in these three. And this shila, this conduct, this right action, ethics, or whatever you want to call it, is really the ground, right? Because it allows one, to live an honorable life. It allows one to lead a noble life. It allows one to always do one's best to show up in life, in the best way. It brings out the best in us. Those of you who know the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh, his book that he wrote on the five mindfulness training. He calls it For a Future to Be Possible. Interesting. And he's really talking not just about us as individuals, but he's really talking about the whole human, human species, the planet. Because without this grounding in kind of ethical or right, behavior of action of the body and of speech, the mind is less seen, even though that's important. Uh, there will be no future for us, and we don't have to. What we could do is pick up the newspaper every day and see that it seems like the world is on an exercise in not following, these fundamental practices that allow human beings to live together with some kind of decency and harmony, whether it's in relationship to families or couples or neighborhoods or countries in the world. So I want to talk about these today because they are so essential. And oftentimes, you know, uh, because many of us come, out of our own religious and non-religious tradition, we sort of see those things as kind of commandments, and we don't like that stuff, do we? We don't like anybody else to tell us what to do. And also our interest is often in, in the meditative, in the mind. So, we kind of, it's kind of like beginner stuff, or much more advanced than that. But it is considered in the meditative tradition that if one is creating in the actions of one's body and mind and speech uh, harmful actions, that will create a disturbed mind. And a disturbed mind, an agitated mind, a mind that is in conflict with itself or others, you might find doesn't settle down well, doesn't calm down well, doesn't stabilize well. So it is considered, especially for those who want to follow a meditative path, that we need a grounding in this, how we conduct ourselves. All right. And I know in the intensive, you are going to be studying the 5 mindfulness trainings, which are based on the original 5 precepts of the Buddha, but Thich Nhat Hanh has kind of continues to experiment with them. So they are usually they're very simple, but these are a little more elaborated and very updated, and that's what people will be studying in the intensive. But I want to share something else this morning. Uh, in the Mahayana, especially in Zen, the foundation really of how an enlightened being, or how somebody who aspires to be an enlightened being, what are the precepts in which they conduct themselves, is found in something called the Brahmajala or Brahmanet Sutra. And that was very widespread in China, Korea, Japan, Tibet, the Mahayana countries, and I would imagine Vietnam. And there are 58 precepts, of which 10 are like big, or often translated as grave, and 48 are less. And so usually these first 10 are what is transmitted uh, to lay people. And for those of you who come out of a religious tradition where kind of morality or ethics are commandments or things that are imposed on you. You're told what to do and not do, and you either follow or you don't. The Buddhist trainings aren't like that. They're really kind of ways to get us to think about and reflect on our actions of body, speech, and mind. They give us guidelines, as you'll see. I mean, do not, but they're not presented in that way. You know what I mean? With those kinds of thou shalt. They're like, think about it, reflect on it, keep your eyes open, see what happens when you do it this way, and see what happens when you do that way, what it does with you and what it does to others. So is that clear? I mean, I want to. And the other thing we'll see how much time we have, I want to share with you. Uh, um, there is primarily, it's an international, but it started here in America. It's called the Zen Peacemakers something, the Zen Peacemakers. It was founded by this guy, this Zen teacher, Roshi Bernie Glassman, who was passed on the last couple of years. And he founded this Zen Peacemakers, nobody, was it order? Maybe it's ZPO, order or something, as his kind of manifesting his vision. Is sort of like in the Plum Villa tradition, the order of interbeing, sort of, the traditional Buddhist precepts, but in a more modern way. So I'm going to share those with you too. We'll see how much time we have. Any questions just about generally sila, right conduct, right action, and the importance of it. And again, when it's missing, when it's missing in our lives personally, when it's missing in our families, and especially when it's missing in the world, missing in politics, there will only be suffering, as we can see. So the first of the grave precepts is not to kill, not to do harm, ahimsa, uh, not to encourage anyone else to do harm, And it immediately implies the opposite, which is respect all life. So if this precept was just, again, people don't even, this is not Buddhism, is it? I mean, I think all religions teach about killing. I mean, if this precept was implemented in this world, of not to kill and to do no harm, I mean, how many problems in the world would have been eliminated, right? War, violence, abuse, right? It's profound. I mean, people don't have to hear the word meditation. They don't have to hear the word insight. They don't have to hear the word spirituality. This is a kind of a fundamental understanding, right? And why is that? Because is there anybody here who wants somebody else to take their life? Nobody? No? Nobody else would like somebody else to take the life of their loved ones, their children, their parents, their friends, their family? Would anybody say, well, that's fine. Just as long as I'm covered, you can have them. No. I mean, it's so natural. In the same way, it is so natural that we want to protect, we want to keep from harm those we care about. Right? I mean, you see, this is not, you don't have to read a book on Buddhism or theology. This is very natural. It's very normal. But this acknowledgement that we are all the same, that all human beings are the same. Nobody wants to be killed. Nobody wants to be harmed. Nobody wants to be the object of violence, you see? And so this precept invites us to kind of raise that up into consciousness and say, I'm not going to kill and I'm not going to support any killing in the world. I'm not going to encourage it. Now again, the interesting thing about these trainings are, in one sense, they can be seen as very sort of black and white, right? But also they can be seen in greater complexity, which is, you know, because life is often not clear, is it? The choices. What do you do with cockroaches? What do you do about rats? What do you do about, you know, I mean, I could go on, but you see, it takes some things are easy and some things take a little more discernment, a little more deep looking in how to apply this. In the Zen peacemakers, they call, so generally this is not killing, respect life, don't encourage others to kill. In the Zen peacemakers, they say, recognizing that I am not separate from all that is. This is the precept of non-killing. Very, very nice, isn't it? Very elegant, right? Because we only can do harm to ourselves. A lot of people do harm to themselves. We only do harm to ourselves, to our loved ones, to the world, to society, to nature, to animals, because we don't feel connected to them. We feel separate from them. So the precept says, when I am not separate, or as I was saying earlier, or when we acknowledge the sameness of all life, then the precept of not killing happens much more naturally, can you see? It's not something that's imposed from the outside. So this is where these other practices, sort of an understanding of interdependence and interconnection, but also through practice of meditation and to really begin to see through the falsity of the self, the separate self, so one can kind of naturally merge into the other. The non-separateness is very helpful. Any questions about this training? Yes. Mm-hmm.
When it comes to roaches and rats,
Well, that was
could,
just beginning, but go on.
could you elaborate on that? Mm.
Well, there are things where in our society it's very natural to the first response is to what? To kill, right? But they are living creatures. They don't want to die, do they? No. And so we need to kind of acknowledge that. Like meat eating is a big thing. The meat eating is taking the life of an animal, right? Of a living being, fish. They're all living beings. They don't. People go, well, fish, they're lower order than. But have you ever gone fishing? The fish kind of just like when you hook them, they just kind of come up with a big smile on their face. No, they struggle for their life. They don't want to die. They're living beings. So right? It seems that but again, in foreign policy, it's like the first response these days seems to be what? What? To fight, to kill, right? We're having all these issues around, police killing, right? And that's because it seems that these days, for many police, the first response is to what? To shoot and take life. You see, there's a lack of understanding that I'm taking somebody's life, just like me, even if they're doing wrong. You see, we've kind of made the taking of life so much easier, as well as TV programs and so much. You know, video games. It's like doing harm seems normal. Right? Violence in our culture, violence in our school, violence in our relationships, violence in our media. It's becoming normal. And then we have this strong precept. Do not kill, do not do harm. This is the purpose of life. Respect all life, care for life, take care of life. Are there a lot of video games based on those principles? Check with your teenagers. So again, you know, the second grave precept, and some of these, very familiar if you're, coming out of your own Judeo-Christian tradition. Second one is don't steal, don't encourage others to steal, and the opposite is what? Be generous, right? If you steal, you take, right? You take for yourself. You take what maybe belongs to someone else for yourself. But the opposite is the generous spirit. What I have, I give to others. I don't take, I give. In the Zen peacemakers, they have a nice way. They say, being satisfied with what I have. This is the precept of non-stealing. It's a little different. You know, yeah. Why do people steal? Why are people greedy? Why do people want more, more, and more. Right? Why do we steal the resources of the world for ourselves? Right? Why do I, always need more? It's sort of what our economy is based on, right? Why we, and they say here, being satisfied with what I have. Right? If I'm satisfied with what I have, if I'm okay with who I am, if I know that, the satisfied mind, the happy mind, the content mind is already here, and I don't need anything really, then why would I be covetous of what somebody else has? Why would I take what isn't mine? Why would it be a problem, right? If somebody said, well, to save the planet, you need to change your lifestyle, right? A lot of people think that's, ask me anything, but don't ask me to change my lifestyle, my consumption patterns, my eating patterns, right? I mean, it's like, we steal because we're not satisfied. We go, our country goes more and more into debt. Who are we stealing from? Our children, our grandchildren. Because why? Because we want more, more, more. So it's, again, very powerful, right? And so, do you see what I'm saying? You can go, well, somebody can go, oh, not killing, check. I haven't killed anybody in the last week or two. I'm doing pretty good. Not stealing. No, no, I haven't been arrested for robbery or breaking and entry. I don't shoplift. You see, that's a very narrow reflection. We can go much deeper with these. Is that clear? The third grave precept: not misusing sex or encouraging others to do so. Honor the body. And the Zen Peacemakers is encountering all creations with respect and dignity. This is the precept of chaste conduct. Interesting word. Again, child sexual abuse. What's it all about? It can be about many things, but essentially it's a sexual transaction, isn't it? Right? It's funny in the whole, not Me Too. What's the whole thing with women and outing all these guys who've been abusive? What's? Yeah, it is Me Too. Oh, okay. Oh, the other one's Black Like Me. Okay, I'm getting mixed up. The Me Too movement. It's interesting. It's all about what? It's all about power, powerful men taking it. But it's never, no one ever talks about sex. It's really bizarre to me because what's going on is sexual. It's the misuse of sex, which is rampant in our society. Is it not? It is. But nobody talks about it. Sexuality has been, elevated that it's like, whew, it's like what? The biggest thing in the world, right? It's like, isn't it? It used to be part, a pleasurable part of the human experience, right? But sexuality is so intense in our society. It is so focused on. you know, desire is so always stimulated in our culture these days, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you all know that what they say, the biggest use of the internet is pornography. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Pornography is what? Sex. Right? Not misusing sex, not misusing this fundamental, pleasurable human experience and using it, you see, using it for what? To get something that we think we need. And a lot of it is we have to get it from who? From someone else, don't we? That's where it gets problematic, you see. We got to get it from somebody else. And if you live in the world of selfishness, if you live in the world where my satisfactions are all that's important, right? Then you create suffering. So again, this you know, this is profound. You know, these precepts, and they again look at you read the accounts of all these wars and civil wars and everything going on in the world, right? I mean, there are tons of them all the time. And if you read the articles, you'll read somewhere in there, rape is occurring. Right? Which is what? Sex, the misuse of sex. So we're only on the third grave precept. I think we've probably solved, 80% of the world's problems. Well, not quite. So you can see when Thich Nhat Hanh said for a future to be possible, which means a good future to be possible, what he was talking about. I mean, is that clear? How essential this is, especially because we all participate in the world. We all are, we participate in the world. We have family, we have friends, we have relationships. How are we showing up in terms of sexuality and its use and its misuse? The fourth grave precept, not lying nor encouraging others to do so, always manifests the truth. And the Zen peacemakers write this, listening and speaking from the heart. Again, a little different emphasis. So, I mean, I don't know, do I really need to talk about it? Or does everybody get it? I mean, what's big in the things these days? Fake news. Anybody ever hear of that? No, on my computer I have an ad blocker on, so I don't get to see all that stuff. Fake news, which means what? Somebody is lying. Right? Somebody is not speaking the truth. Right? Somebody is distorting the facts, distorting reality because they have an ulterior purpose. They're lying. Now sometimes, again, it's, we have in our own culture, we talk about white lies, right? Which is an understanding that sometimes you don't always tell the truth, right? Right? You see, so again, it's not black and white. There's always the situation, the appropriateness, what's the compassionate thing to do, not to cause suffering. So it's always, not clear. Sometimes, again, there's for most of us we know, life shows up often in the gray areas. But to have these types of training, these types of meditations enables us to kind of have at least, again, a touchstone uh, and also something to challenge us. We need to be challenged. Manifest the truth. So all of these not only have don't, they have do. Don't just not kill, don't do harm, but respect life, protect life. Don't steal, be generous. Don't misuse sex, honor the body. Give all human beings respect and dignity. Don't lie, manifest the truth. Speak from the heart. When you hear that, what does that mean to you? To speak from the heart as the manifestation of, does your heart always have the truth? Not really. But the heart always has what? Our truth. Right? So we have to be careful in this world that we don't put a capital T on truth. That's what makes war deficient. But I like it, because again, it says, yeah, I'm not afraid to speak my truth. Now, again, we can always speak our truth, can't we? Remember, there's, situations, may not always be good to speak the truth to your boss, right? If you want to stay employed. It may always not be best to speak your truth to your family or friends for reasons. But on the other hand, isn't it wonderful when you can speak your truth? Does everybody know situations in their life when they finally spoke their truth? How did it feel? Good. Yeah. Again, it's very important that we don't put a capital T on truth. That whenever we speak our truth, we acknowledge that we're speaking our truth. This is my truth. This is what's true for me. It may not be true for you. But oftentimes we hide the truth. We shy away from the truth, which is often, denying really our own experience, denying who we are. Because we might be what? What? We're concerned about others may judge us. We might be afraid to speak the truth because of consequences. I think it's often hard to speak the truth because we don't know what's going to happen next. You see that? It's a little risky, isn't it, to speak the truth sometimes because we don't know how it's going to be heard. I mean, that's why we always want to be discerning and skillful to the situation, to the person, but we don't know how life is going to respond to us when we speak the truth. I mean, the best thing would be for what? Would be the best outcome when you speak the truth to someone. Yeah. Or at least they hear it. They may not accept it, but at least they're willing to accept that that's your truth and not try to talk you out of it. Right? And often when we speak the truth in that this kind of open way, it opens the door to invite the other people, the other person, to what? To speak their truth. I mean, it shouldn't all be one-sided, should it? And now everything's open and on the table. And we'll, then there's a process. But this fundamental, not to lie. Just take a moment, just reflect on your life. Do you always show up? Just close your eyes a second. How do you show up in life? Do you really have integrity around manifesting the truth, your truth? Do you try to speak from your heart? I mean, many people, they speak, always concerned about the response, the judgment, out of fear. They use their words to be liked or to get along. We hide our truth. So take a moment just to reflect on your life. Do I manifest my truth in life? Or am I afraid of speaking up? If you have one sort of idea or feeling and somebody asks you and you don't tell them something, oh no, I don't think that or I don't feel that. Isn't that a kind of lying? Again, within bounds, appropriateness, etc., Yeah, not so easy, is it? So again, these are to be reflected on, challenged. They should challenge us. Thich Nhat Hanh calls them trainings. He means it's like, we're training these things. Training takes time. We're learning, we're training. They're not absolutes. The fifth grave precept, not giving or taking drugs, which includes alcohol or anything, nor encouraging others. Do not cloud the mind. See clearly. And the Zen peacemakers write, cultivating a mind that sees clearly. This is the precept of not being ignorant. I'm sure you've all had the experience of being sober and being around people who are drunk. You hear a lot of wisdom coming out of their mouth. People who are high on this and that. So again, this is not like bad, 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 you see. This is about that, we want a clear mind in this life, right? And often what happens when we take alcohol and drugs is we what? It clouds our mind, it clouds our judgment, it clouds our ability to be really present. So it's really ultimately about the mind and about the clouding of the mind. So has anybody ever, because they indulged too much, might have said or done something that they might have later regretted? Has anybody ever had that experience, or is that a rare experience? Or has anybody ever had you come to you and sort of apologize for what they said or did when they were intoxicated, when their mind was clouded? Yeah. So again, we live in a society where the use of drugs and alcohol is pervasive, rampant, you know, socially acceptable, right? And so I'm not really, I'm not talking about legal or illegal. Like for me, I think marijuana should be legal. I mean, I don't think you should, you know, put people in jail, destroy their lives, right? But at the same time, does the taking of a drug cloud the mind? Yes, it does, right? I mean, many lives in our society are, constantly being ruined. Some just for short term, some for long term, through their use of alcohol and drugs and even prescription drugs that cloud the mind. Is that true? Yeah. I mean, these days it's almost, you're abnormal if either you or somebody in your family or, a close friend has not been in rehab, right? I mean, it's like, where, like, where have you been all your life? But you know what I'm saying? It's just, I mean, I'm very happy that people go into rehab, but you understand it's just kind of part of the landscape these days, right? And when you look at child abuse and violence, sexual, you know, alcohol is often a strong, or drugs use is a, crime, strong component, strong variable in these things. You know, they are not benign, are they? So, so yeah, not cultivating a mind that sees clearly. So let's, before we go on to the next six or four or five, let's talk a bit because it's important. What's coming up for you? You may agree, you may disagree, just your own experience. Do these make sense to you, or do you think they're a little over the top, a little puritanical, kind of missing something? Or it's confusing to you how to apply it? Yes, Kevin.
With all of them, what comes to mind is kind of shadowy, or the ways in which I rationalize any of those. And for me, that's the part where I have to look carefully because, as you said, at the surface, I haven't killed anybody and I'm not stealing, but it's kind of in my attitudes. How is that very subtle where I want to protect me? And so that's what this is, says to me is, how do I look more carefully and deeply at that, and not just on the surface? And it's a little intimidating, just that place where that self-centeredness where
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm being self-righteous, but my intention and my motivation is not always quite so.
Yeah. So this is a deeper aspect of of this whole practice, which is, the mind. I mean, again, if people just got it on the behavioral aspect, just stop the behaviors, stop the wrong speech, I think that would be a great step forward for humanity. But you're absolutely right. I mean, one can outwardly manifest sort of good behavior, and yet in one's mind be not so good, not coming from such a pure motivation, right? I mean, outwardly we could look like the nicest person in the world, right? What a great guy Fred is. He's so nice. Inside he could hate everybody. He's smiling. He's good. What a jerk, right? But outwardly you wouldn't know that, would you? You'll have to guess which one I'm doing now. But did you see what I'm saying? So it's kind of interesting, and I think that's kind of a deeper level, which is really having one's mind, one's thoughts in congruence with one's actions of body speech. And that's what we want to eventually want to be to. But, the reason we see these as foundation practices is because they stop the grosser aspects, which is the actions of the body, the actions of the speech. But the actions of the body and the actions of speech, they're coming from what? The mind. The mind is a director. So obviously, the transformation in the mind, to have a healthy mind, to have a mind that experience its interconnection with all beings. That is a generous mind. That's a mind that always sees the needs of others, the needs of society as equal to their own. The one that, the mind that has this respect, et cetera, uh, is the best mind. And it certainly will make, the speech and the bodily actions much easier. But yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons that another way these trainings are often looked at as mirrors, right? So we it's like with a mirror we can see how we look. Otherwise, we don't know how we look, right? And so these go, ooh, yeah, when you read them and you go, let me, like you say, you reflect, yeah. Well, I haven't killed anybody recently, but do I kill people in my mind? Do I do harm to people in my mind? Do I lie to myself? Right? Do I misuse my own body? Do I use my body in a harmful way? So I mean, this is the whole problem, with kind of making progress on a spiritual path when you're by yourself. And many people think, I can do this myself, is because, the capacity for self-delusion and not to see ourselves objectively is, dominant. Right? So, we need someone, somebody, some standards, something outside of ourselves that we can, like these, where we can, it's like a mirror to go, yeah, how, how impeccable is my behavior? Even though we may look good on the outside. Good. Other questions about these first five? Anything not clear about how to apply them? Yes.
Withholding truth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been very, in reading about the four agreements, I've been very influenced about like being impeccable with your word, because you can say, oh, I'm honest, I tell the truth. But I have struggled in withholding truth, because the telling of the truth, as you said, will have consequences.
Yeah.
May damage relationships, may
Mm-hmm.
create consequences you don't want. Um, but it's hard to feel that you're living a life of integrity if you're withholding truth.
Yes. So again, this is the problem. The problem. It's complex. I mean, some things are very obvious, right? And and like we said, certain times speaking our truth, often will have consequences, because there's always a problem that somebody will not be happy to hear our version of the truth. Has anybody ever noticed that? That you don't always, when you speak your truth, you don't always get you don't always get applause, you don't always get a thank you for sharing, it's like, yeah. So you're absolutely right. So, again, I think there's got to be discernment, there's got to be intelligence, there's got to be compassion, right, in our actions. But I think, what's the worst thing going to happen? And the other thing I think about communication is we somehow feel like life's going to come to a stop or something. like there's no moment after, right? I mean, hopefully there's always in life, you know, a moment after. So if you speak your truth and you realize you're getting a, you know, a response that you didn't hope to get, well, you know, it's now it's continue on. You know what I'm saying? It's not like we have to get it perfectly. A lot of people think, oh, I gotta wait for the right time and the perfect thing, and you know, and then years go by. Again, I think we have to kind of develop a kind of greater robustness in our lives, you know, and especially if I think we always preface our words with, this is simply my truth. This is not truth. This is simply my view. I could be deluded, but you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And you just present who you are, right? And the person will present who they are, and hopefully, you know, it'll continue. You know, the relationship, the dialogue will continue. It may not. It could blow up. Anybody ever have that blow? Anybody have a situation where it just blows up? Right? I mean, you kind of even if you had the best intentions, right? I mean, you thought, gee, this was kind of easy, and you had good intentions, and the person just took it exactly the wrong way that you meant it. Has that ever happened to anybody? No. I mean that there it is. So we can either be cautious our whole life, or we can be a little more robust, but wise, compassionate, discerning. I mean, there's no easy answer here when you get into the gray area. I mean, does that answer your question?
Well, I don't really know if it was a question, but
Or-
the struggle of knowing, speaking the truth, and then living with the consequences versus not speaking the truth
Yeah.
and thinking that you're salvaging something. So
You're what?
salvaging something, in other words, not putting a relationship at risk.
Yeah. I mean, it's this is the problem with life, you know. It's your call. Yeah, it's not easy. You know, life was so much easier a couple of generations ago. You know, I mean, you know, it's just like, you know, everybody knew their role, everybody knew their place, everybody knew how to say things and not say things, everybody knew who the boss was. You know what I'm saying? You could have all kinds of issues around it, but in a certain sense, it was easy. You know what I mean? But we've done it. We not only have we done away with all that, but we continue to do away with more of it, right? Which then presents this kind of problem, right? You know, a lot of people grew up. You know, you never speak up to your betters, right? You know, you never tell the truth to people who are, you know, have power over you, right? I mean, that's. But those days are over. You know, where we have freedom, but freedom in a certain way makes life more difficult to have more choices. You know? I mean, we have to acknowledge that this is you know, at least the way we're doing it here at least in our country, our culture, you know, this is a great experiment. So far, it doesn't seem to be going too well, does it? Kind of looking how the whole thing's unfolding. But you know, this is the time we're in. You know, there are, you know, a lot of, again, societal norms. You know, all these things are really for many people no longer operant. So it puts much more emphasis on just what you're talking about. You know, it's like communication, right? You know, children and parents. I mean, the whole thing is just very different. So the sixth grave precept, not discussing the faults of others or encouraging others to do so. See the perfection of others. So this is another kind of variation on, this is sort of like right speech, but I would certainly encourage us to think of right speech as not just the outer words, but the inner dialogue. Because most of us are talking all the time, right? And that inner dialogue, the way we're talking, well, sometimes we're just even talking about ourselves. But, our judgments, our evaluations, our assessments, our critical mind, our negative mind, right? Not just our speech, uh, is conditioning our mind with negativity. And if we are focused on the faults of others, the shortcomings of others, then we are not focusing on what? The good stuff, the strengths of others, the good things they do, the nice things they do, the bad things they don't do. I mean, they could certainly be a lot worse, right? So that critical mind is very dangerous, and in our society, I mean, so many people, that's their issue, right? So many people come and they go, I got to do something about this critical, judgmental mind of mine. Whew. Right? It just never lets up. So this is about that, not always focusing on the negative. The Zen Peacemakers one is unconditionally accepting what each moment has to offer. This is the precept of not talking about others' errors and faults, which is interesting. It's another kind of way to look at it, that when we are critical of another, when we see what they're doing and we are judgmental or faulting it, we are fundamentally not accepting them as they are. We are not accepting that they're showing that the way they're showing up is the way they're showing up. That this is who they are. This is what they do. This is what they say. This is it, right? So we're kind of stepping back from that, and we're going. Well, we're just saying all kinds of things, and sometimes we say it outwardly. No, I mean, this doesn't mean that you never give constructive criticism. That we don't talk to each other and try to help each other change or don't. But it's talking about you know faults, and then it even goes. And this is not discussing the faults of others or encouraging others to do so. So this is getting into gossip, right? So this is not only saying that that I'm always in my mind noticing the faults of others, but that I'm actually in my speech doing it myself, or talk about a gray area, or encouraging others when they do it by my response. So if one thinks that gossip or speech that is negative about other people is harmful, then this training really makes us look at, again, not only our own speech. Do I do a lot of talking to this one negatively about that one? Right? Or when someone's talking to me negatively about somebody and I listen, am I not supporting and encouraging that? Okay, so it's kind of big picture. Again, it's like, how do I want to show up in this world? What do I want to support in this world? How do I want to relate to others? What's my truth? And as was said over here, the easiest thing is always to what? To go along, right? I used to love it when I used to, work in, I always felt the work lunchroom. This is the place, right? Yeah, it's a cauldron of negativity often. Gossip and backbiting, you know what I mean? And so what the easiest thing for me to do back then was to just not, walk out or not. But I thought, no. So they'd be going on about somebody, and all of a sudden I'd pipe up with a positive quality. Or have you ever noticed this about this person or that? And people go, what? What I mean? It'd be interesting, Or if somebody, I mean, I still do that. If somebody comes to me with something negative about somebody, I say, I don't. Why are you telling me? Why don't you tell them? I mean, it's like, it's, it's like, yeah, if you think somebody has a negative quality that's doing harm, talk to them, share it with them, so you can help them. Telling me doesn't help anybody. You know, we want to, it's like, put up or shut up. Talk to them. But this is just negative. This doesn't help anybody, does it? Gossip, backbiting, slander, all these kinds of things. And it was always my, my deep reflection on that kind of backbiting in the lunchroom, right? Based on what I observed, that I am sure. As soon as I left, people were saying negative things about me. I mean, it was like I could see they were doing about everybody else. I'm sure as soon as I left, it's like I've read. Anyhow, we cannot control the world, and we cannot control other beings, but we can certainly do we have to have some ability to control the actions of our own body, speech, and mind, and to do our best to show up in a world in a more, in a nobler way. And again, my sense for a lot of people in these kind of wrong speech things is they don't realize what they're doing, do they? It's so normal, right? It's so normal to get into the lunchroom and just start what? What? Anybody ever hang out in the lunchroom? What goes on? People go. You walk in and you start talking about what? Gossip. And it's mostly negative gossip. Can you believe so and so? And everybody just, oh yeah, wonderful, and it just feeds itself. And of course, there's a reason why people do it. Why does it do it? It makes them feel better, which takes us to the seventh. Do not praise yourself while abusing others, nor elevating oneself and blaming others or encouraging others to do so. Right. Yeah, so this is important to understand. There is this momentary good feeling of self-righteousness because when we're pointing out the shortcomings, the faults of another human being, in that moment, how are we? What? Superior, blameless. Can you see how good that feels? So there's a reason people, do it over and over again. So this, not praising oneself and abusing others is very, very important. There's in the Bodhisattva trainings, it says, I give victory to others and I take defeat upon myself. It's the opposite, you know. Sort of like if we took this one, it'd be like, let me praise other people. And if there's anybody's shortcomings I want to point out, let me point out my own. That would be a very interesting lunchroom discussion. If you go in there and go, wow, Just, you kind of poured forth all your shortcomings of the day. Boy, was I a jerk earlier today, and I can't believe I said that, and I was so uncompassionate there, and I was so. That would at least be helpful to me, right? And it might help other people get some insight. Oh, yeah. Why don't we talk about our own shortcomings today? Okay, for those of you still going to the lunchroom, why don't you try that? Let's for a change, let's all talk about our own shortcomings. I mean, it could be a very beneficial discussion, couldn't it? Be very helpful. Yes.
A few weeks, I'm heading home to my niece's wedding. And I've been, anytime I call, I follow up and, what's going on. And there's so much drama about, there's just so much drama going on there about this person's mad at this one for this thing and
Oh,
that
yeah.
thing. And it's just so silly. And it is a bit of a superiority complex where I feel like, God, I'm so glad I'm not that and I'm not there, and this is just ridiculous. And but then I'll say to my sister, because it's for my niece, I'm just like, so much suffering over such a joyous event, and
Mm-hmm.
this seems silly. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it's a superiority thing in me too for being glad that I'm not doing that, or at least as much anymore, or not at all. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, it's
Yeah,
all this negativity and this drama around these kinds of
a wedding.
family events or all kinds of events.
Yeah.
It's sad, and people don't know it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's wonderful that you kind of turn it around a little bit and say, wouldn't it be, this is a happy occasion. Why don't we focus on the goodness? You see that, we can get away with that, as well as, just change the conversation. Now, again, we can change the conversation. We can move it in a different direction. Sometimes by our unwillingness to respond. Oh, okay. Anything else going on in your life? Right? We don't have to support negativity. Now, again, as someone in process of changing, to be aware that, wow, isn't that interesting? I don't have a stomach for this stuff anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's probably good. I mean, it's good to acknowledge that. That doesn't necessarily mean you're feeling superior,
Yeah. I think that,
but to be happy for the changes you're making, I think that's okay.
yeah, I thank you.
I don't,
And the
yeah,
other, it's just frustration because I keep inviting ways of, a different way of being, and people aren't biting.
really,
And
really, you've had that problem. I wonder. All the rest of us, I mean, no matter what pearl of wisdom we spread, everybody just jumps right on it and so grateful. Listen to what we say. I don't know, Raven. You're going to have to. Raven, this is it.
it's just making life so hard, and it doesn't
Yeah,
have to be.
well,
And
yeah, but I would imagine that there was a time in your life not that long ago where
right,
you
that's
didn't
why I
have
don't
this
live
insight.
there.
What?
That's why I don't live there.
Right, but
Yeah.
that's our humility, right? That we realize, yeah, that wasn't, I used to jump right in. Maybe you used to be the leader of the pack. You see what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
to go, yeah, I didn't get it either because I didn't have any template. I didn't have any standards. I just thought this was normal. See, we think this is normal,
Right.
and we don't see how toxic it is,
Mm-hmm.
and that it permeates our culture from the highest to the lowest. It permeates our culture. It's not just at the little level of the family
Oh,
and
I
relation.
know. I
What?
know. Yeah, I know. I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but we realize, oh, it's all, so it's got to, change has got to start somewhere. Could start with your family.
I'm trying. I keep throwing that out.
Yeah, well, but again, a lot of times it's also by not responding or change. Sometimes, a lot of people are not ready, but just by no longer supporting that kind of
Yeah.
speech, no longer supporting that kind of behavior.
Be the example.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They may, you don't want to go there and go, gee, or, you don't want to sit there and go, gee, yeah, can't believe what a bunch of gossips you all are. That might be a little strong. You might be creating more problems for yourself. You see what I'm saying? But,
Yeah.
uh, you see what I mean? We don't want to be self-righteous. We don't want to be officious or anything. Just go, yeah, I thought what you said is, I'm so looking forward to this wedding, Joyous. Why don't we talk about, the good things that are going on? Which might be helpful to your sister because she might be caught in the drama
Yeah.
and not noticing all the goodness,
Yeah.
right? So that can be very helpful. This is an interesting one, the eighth one. Not sparing the Dharma assets or encouraging others to do so. Give unstintingly. Do not withhold. Sort of what we're talking about. And the Zen Peacemakers is using all the ingredients of my life. This is the precept of not being stingy. Right? So this, this is really the precept of generosity, not being stingy. Stingy means what? What? We hold back, or we just parcel it out, little by little. We're often not generous. And the Zen peacemakers say, using all the ingredients of my life. See, some people think, generosity means money, right? People think, well, should be more generous, more donate to charity, or this kind of stuff, which is important because especially in America, we are very we like to hold on to our money, don't we? It's all for me. But all our assets. Talk about Dharma assets, or all the ingredients. What are my Dharma assets? For those of you, Dharma is sort of now here talking about the totality of of the fruits of the path. What are your Dharma assets that you might have picked up over the years? Or what is a Dharma asset? If you don't want to talk to yourself. A Dharma asset could be what? Patience. Yeah, learning, deep listening is an asset. Open mind. Yeah, open mind, be open. Viewpoints of others, contentment, compassion, joy. Any other assets come from the path? Equanimity, balance, stability, non-fear. Could even be some wisdom or intelligence sometimes. What else? Generosity, acceptance, yeah. Love. How about that one? Yeah. Love. Yeah. So again, do we live our life in this open way? I like the Zen peacemakers, using all the ingredients of my life. Right? So when you go to this wedding, right, are you going to bring all your Dharma assets with you, all the ingredients of your life? Do we bring all the, do we bring all the ingredients, all our Dharma assets, do we bring them to work every day? Right? Or do we leave a bunch of them home? Do we bring all our assets to our relationships? Especially in our closest relationships? Or do we leave a lot of them somewhere else? Do we parcel out our assets? You see? There are those who are deserving of my assets, right? There are those that are worthy of my generosity. And there are those who are totally unworthy. True? But are we willing to show up unstintingly? Always willing to share all our assets? You know, the next one's a really good one. The ninth grave precept. Not indulging in anger. Well, that was pretty good. It took you to get to 9 before you felt the ouch. Not indulging in anger or encouraging others to do so. Actualizing harmony, which is the opposite. The Zen peacemakers say, transforming suffering into wisdom. This is the precept of not being angry. So anger is suffering. When we are angry, we are suffering. Is that clear? I mean, it may feel good. We may feel so righteous. We think we're right. We think they're wrong. But the bottom line, as a feeling state, in Buddhist, wholesome emotions feel good, right? They're warm. They're harmonious. They're open. They're spacious. When you're happy, it feels good. Your mind's at ease when you're happy. But when you're angry, even if you think you're right, and we always think we're right when we're angry, but as an experience, is anger a wholesome emotion? No. It's very disturbing. It disturbs our mind, it disturbs our thoughts. When we are angry, we ruminate. That's a normal characteristic. Everybody understand rumination? Most of us, when we are angry, we just don't do it for 10 seconds. We love to what? Yeah, we ruminate. We over and over and over and over. Ruminate over and over. Right? Like the comes from the cow, chewing the cud. What are they called? Ruminants or something? Something like that, I mean, that's, we gotta chew on my anger. Right? And all it does is disturb our minds. And it often leads, anybody ever say or do things when they're angry that they later regretted? Is that another common experience that we all know? Right. So anger is interesting. I mean, this doesn't mean a flash of anger. Sometimes a flash of anger is okay. I mean, it's an alert. Something's wrong here. But this is the anger that is cultivated. The anger that continues long after the incident that produced the anger stopped, ceased. Is that clear? It's that anger that disturbs the mind and leads to harmful actions of body, speech, and mind. So that is why anger is given its own precept in Buddhist, because it's has the most potential to do harm. Most of us, when we're anxious or worried or scared or depressed, most of the harm is what just done to ourselves. But anger is fiery. And there's a part of it that wants to lash out, to harm. Remember, the first precept was what? Do no harm. If you think about anger, when anybody ever caught in anger, you often want to harm the person you believe is the cause of your anger. Is that true? Right? Just turn on the news every day and listen to our president. You'll see it. There it is. Right? Immediately, anger. Because he feels somebody's harmed him, somebody's demeaned him, somebody's, anger. And when you're angry, you want to do harm. And when you do harm, you can do real harm. And it snowballs. So, yeah, so transforming suffering into wisdom, transforming anger into wisdom. In actually Buddhist, sort of Buddhist psychology or whatever you'd call it, interesting enough, see, we would think that the antidote to anger is patience, which it certainly is, but the true antidote to anger is wisdom or understanding, right? It's interesting because in Buddhism, patience is not like a state that you impose. I'm really cultivating patience. You know, you all know that one. I'm going to be patient. Yeah. Inside, you're just burning, but outwardly, just going to learn to be patient with this person. Especially if you've ever been a parent, and your children become teenagers, you'll understand. You'll understand that one. In Buddhism, the antidote to anger is understanding. Understanding what? Causes and conditions. When you understand who a person is and they're doing what they're doing because of their own causes and conditions, then one can be understanding and patient and accepting and not angry. Oftentimes, actually, when you get in touch with the suffering that is often behind someone who's acting out in anger, it brings forth compassion. They're suffering. That's why they did that, or didn't do that, or said that. And oftentimes, when you don't respond to the person's angry behavior or words, but, let them know that you're aware that they're suffering, it often can change the conversation. Some people just make them angrier. I mean, it doesn't work with everyone. But so again, let's just talk about these for a minute, because again, I want to present these. There are people here who are in the intensive, people on live stream, and all of us. I mean, I'm just learning a lot just from giving the talk. Reminds me of many things in my own behavior. So the 10 grave precepts, they come again from the Brahmajala Brahmanet Sutra, which comes from India. It's Sutra of the Buddha, translated into Chinese in I think the 4th or 5th century. And again, widely practiced, especially by lay people. Ordained monks and nuns have hundreds of precepts that they have to take. But lay people, these 10 are the key ones. And again, can you see, just the way we talked, not killing, not real, recognizing that we're not separate from anyone, being generous, being satisfied with what I have, not stealing, not misusing sex, honoring the body, respect dignity, not to lie, manifesting the truth, speaking from the heart, not clouding the mind with drugs and alcohol or encouraging others to do so. It always amazes me when you know somebody has a problem with alcohol, that what do people give them? A bottle of wine. It's like, or, a fifth of whiskey. It's like, they're quite capable of buying that for themselves. I mean, it's just interesting. It's like, how often do we encourage others? I mean, and we maybe do it from good intentions, you know what I'm saying? But we don't think about the consequences. of what we do, and what are we encouraging, what are we supporting in our giving. Again, not talking about the faults, seeing the perfection in others, not praising ourselves, blaming others, abusing others, uh, speaking one's truth, being unstinting and giving one's assets, not indulging in anger, being understanding. So again, these are not, I hope you're understanding the way I'm presenting them today. These are things to reflect on. And it's a moving target, right? The easiest thing is to have absolutes. We know these days that there are lots of people or certain people in the world that are just looking for absolutes, and I understand why. It's simpler, but it's highly problematic because life is messy, and there's a lot of gray area in life, right? And it takes some degree of ethics and some degree of self-reflection and some degree of critical thinking to kind of find that, find your way through the gray area where it's not clear. So are there any questions or comments before we stop for lunch? What? Oh, number 10. Well, it's not defaming the three treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Anyhow, but it's just, I don't know if everybody here, is into Buddhism or the precepts. So I sort of left it out. It says not defame, but I wasn't, like not saying. So it says not defaming the three treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, or encouraging others to do so. And then it's interesting. Somebody else called it experience the intimacy of things. Be present to everything. In the Zen peacemakers, they call their 10th grade precept is honoring my life as an instrument of peacemaking, which is really what the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are about. It's how to become a truly peaceful person. Some people think, well, I'm anti-war, so therefore I'm a peace person. But, there are a lot of anti-war people that are very angry, not very peaceful. So, this is about, really becoming a peaceful person. A person that does no harm in their body, in the actions of their body, speech, and mind. So are there anything not clear? It's all kind of simple. Yes.
The concept of the last thing you just mentioned versus acceptance, meaning in a world that is giving a lot of challenges, and yet if you are honoring the Zen path and want to be a peacemaker or a peace instrument,
Yes.
this concept of acceptance when others around you are following the opposite route sometimes. Yeah. And this is the discernment you were speaking of, I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, this
in each
is,
step, where are we at?
What?
Each step as we go along, it's almost as if we have to stop and say, okay, am I in our own path? Where am I at this moment? Am I in acceptance mode to the point that people will trample over me and therefore I will not be able to be around to be an instrument for others?
Yeah. So it's important how we understand or use, like you said, the acceptance. Acceptance for me does not mean approval at all. To accept the world as it is simply a statement of fact. To accept a person as they are is simply a statement of fact. It's an understanding that the world, every individual in it, is showing up in this moment the way they are because of past causes and conditions. That gives you the peace because you're not always angry with the world, like it shouldn't be the way it is. People shouldn't be the way it is. They are. So you give all that up because you understand, yeah, the world is the way it is because of causes and conditions. Just look at history, or the person is the way they are because if you understood their past, their childhood, that's where they are. So it gets over all that anger or shouldn't be or can't be or why is it this way, and it allows you to go forward in all situations, including your family's wedding, with an open heart. It's like, how can I help? It's like I don't have to pull back into myself. You know what I mean? And how do I find my way through this? We don't need to find our way through anything. It's just every moment, wherever I am, whatever's going on, can I show up like a peacemaker? Is that clear? And because a lot of our struggle and difficulty is we can't accept the reality of people, the world, situations. I mean, if I said the world's a mess, I mean, that would be an understatement, right? I mean, it's yeah, and the really the only issue is, to what do they say? It sounds simplistic, but do I want to be part of the problem or do I want to be part of the solution? How about that? And you're clear, yeah, wherever I am, I don't want to contribute to to making the problem worse, and I want to do whatever I can to bring peace, to bring understanding, to bring insight, to bring kindness, to bring, you know what I mean, healing, whatever it is we're doing. I mean, you're a doctor, right? I mean, that's right. I mean, when you're in your role as a doctor, are you always just cursing disease, right? Are you telling your nurse, I don't want to see any more sick people today. I've just had it, with disease and sick people and people complaining about their ailments. I mean, is that your daily mind state? Why not?
And therefore, I'm looking for the peace within me. And when I see the others around me suffering, it's this inner desire, obviously, to be there.
But the other piece I was saying to you is what allows you to do that is you accept that everybody you're going to see today is sick. In your case, physically sick. I'm not even going into the mind.
Yeah.
And it doesn't throw you. It doesn't anger you. It doesn't embitter you. It doesn't sadden you because you're in a mode of what? It's simple. You're in a mode of what?
The mode of the healer.
Yeah. It's like whoever shows up in your office, it's like, how can I figure out what's going on with them so I can help them? Right?
Yes.
See how simple it is? So what you do in your office is what you now have to do everywhere.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you see how easy, and that's it. You just, wherever you are, yeah, there's sickness everywhere, not just in your office. There's all kinds of sickness, all kinds of problems, and that's the world. And also within ourselves, and so how do we show up in a way that always helps?
But the challenge with that is this desire to fix, because there is a potential challenge with that, wanting to fix, because this is where potential judgment can come in, or criticism.
Yeah.
This person needs fixing.
Yeah.
And now, so in my case, they come in requesting the fix. That is consent.
Yeah, well, what's your name? What's your first name again? Ron, that's right. Ron, that's the problem. Yeah, so, yeah.
So when I'm at home, they're not asking for the fix.
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear your diagnosis and assessment. Yeah, you got a problem. But there it is. You see, there it is, and it's like that. You can laugh, right? So yeah. So what you're saying is, in your professional life, there's a transaction, and it's very clear roles, right? And you're the role of the expert, of the, right? And they're all listening to you. They've come to you for advice. They've come for you for treatment, right? Okay. But in the world, it's not like that, is there? So we need more discernment. Because if you act to everybody in your life the way you do in your office, you may find problems. Have you noticed that? You see? And that's where the discernment is. That's where you got to go, oh, I understand, you can see this, this how the situation is different. The context is different. People are showing up in different ways. So that's why, it's complex. Like you might say, in your office, it's simple. You're the doctor, they're the patient. It's a very simple transaction, you see. But in life, it's not like that. So we have to be more skillful. I think that's, we have to be discerning, more skillful, we have to be wiser. Because, yeah, because people don't want to be fixed. That's the problem, right? Even though they suffer, they really don't want to be fixed because they don't, for lots of reasons. A lot of it is because they really don't understand, like in the Buddhist context, that they are Buddhists and that they have the potential of real freedom. But people don't know that. They think, the way things are, all I can do is, it's like if you're a doctor, well, maybe I can get a little better, maybe my symptoms can remediate a little. The idea of being healthy, of being symptom free, is often not, see, that's often maybe the message you give. Yeah. But not everybody's ready for that message, believes the message. Right? They called the Buddha the great physician. And they actually use the analogy that the Buddha is like the doctor. We're like the patients. The Dharma is the prescription. And the Sangha are those who follow the prescription. Right? And I often say to people, when I give talks, I say, just to go to the doctor and have him or her work you up and tell you what's wrong and giving you a prescription and going to the pharmacy and getting the meds if that's what you're doing and bringing the meds home and putting them in your medicine cabinet is not going to get you well. Right? You got to take the medicine. And a lot of people leave that part out in their spiritual life. Right? And we wonder why we don't get well. Well, because we're not taking the medicine as directed. Anyhow, does that answer your question? Okay. And okay. Anything else before we end? What? Oh, live stream. I forgot. So the question is about, can I say more about anger, especially for those of us who are conflict averse? Oh, very quickly. I mean, that's like another whole talk is about anger. Yeah, so, I think we always need to look at the causes, right? And one would have to ask himself, well, since, again, it's like there's always conflict in life, isn't there? Because people have different opinions, people have different ways, people have different ideas. I mean, I don't mean bloody conflicts or physical, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, to be alive is to always be in some kind of conflict, right? Just to express an opinion. So when one has to ask himself, again, does one accept that we live in a world where people have different opinions, different ideas, different ways of seeing things, and that's just the way it is. It doesn't have to be a source of anger to us. Now, if somebody says, well, one, I don't like conflict, and two, I'm scared of anger. Well, that's something they got to look at because, well, I don't know. I mean, but yeah, I would say, what's wrong with conflict? If it's very conscious, people are very present, people acknowledging differences, and people are willing to communicate around it, right? In that sense, conflict can be very opening because hopefully conflicts will be what? Resolved. And when conflicts are resolved, it often leads to a better place, a better understanding, a remediation of suffering. So to be conflict averse in a generality, I think is really missing a lot of the opportunity, to enter the robustness in life and deal with things. I mean, we have to have some strength in us. We can't be afraid. The third generosity in Buddhism of dana, in the teachings on generosity and the paramitas, the third generosity that the Buddha gives, or the Buddhist teaching gives, is the teaching of non-fear. Do not be afraid. Very powerful. How can one go through life without fear? Anyhow, that's another talk. Thank you all.